Hey YouTube, this is Rishika. So this video would be my 49th video tutorial on data stage. As you all know, I'm trying to make a series of video tutorials on data stage for YouTube. So for the past video tutorials, I have been trying to I was trying to work on some of the real-time tasks, like the important ones, mostly asked in interview point of scenarios thing. And before that, I finished the debug category in the palette and most of the stages in the processing category. I know we have a few left in the processing category, but before jumping onto that, I thought I would make a project flow video on project flow or ETL project flow, because whenever a candidate is faced an interview, mostly people, apart from the theoretical questions or real-time scenarios, they might also ask what's a project flow, or what is the what's a project flow in your project, or what's happening in the real time, or how do you make it to prod, and what's all that stuff, like the real-time stuff, right? And if it's a new candidate, or if it's a less experienced candidate or a junior developer thing, so this might be an issue to attend interviews. So that's the reason I'm trying to explain this video. I'm trying to explain the project flow or ETL, kind of like ETL project flow in this video. Okay, so it's gonna be like more of general project flow. It's not that every project on the world implementing data stage gonna use this all the steps explained in this video. Okay, it's like I'm trying to incorporate most of the steps. I tried my best to incorporate most of the steps, but however, yeah, it depends on the project and the companies, organization, client and vendor relationships, and all that stuff, budget and all that stuff. So it's not mandatory that every project should follow the same step by step thing, but overall, yeah, it's gonna be same. Okay, so the project gonna miss probably a one or two steps, or more than one or two steps, but overall the project flow that will be pretty much same. Okay, so yeah, let's get into that then. So let's see step by step thing. So obviously, if we need to have project from scratch, or if you are doing something project is planned, obviously we need a plan, right? Because okay, so we have some idea, but how to implement the idea? So we obviously need to have a plan, right? To plan to execute or implement the idea, right? So yeah, so obviously the first phase is a planning phase. Then after planning phase there might be a design phase. I'm saying there might be a design phase because yeah, it depends again. Okay, so there might be a design phase, but is I can say like this is a pretty much a standard flow in projects I have worked with, but this may not be standard for all the projects in the data stage. Okay, so that being said, yeah, next might be the project design phase. Project design phase is okay, so they have a plan. Okay, so they have a concrete, or they have like a vague plan. Okay, but how that plan gonna work out? So how that plan gonna work out? So they have to lay out a design, right? So yeah, that's the sometimes, yeah, that's a design phase. And sometimes what happens is project planning and design, it's pretty much together in one phase. Okay, so that is one thing which I want to mention. And the other thing, and later when you have all project planning and designing stuff is done, then the next phase is requirements gathering phase, right? Because obviously you have everything in your hand. Now you want to know, okay, so in the project planning and design phase, you know what are the requirements you need, like you need extra hardware or extra resources to work on, or extra software, or something. Okay, something. Okay, so someone need to gather all those requirements, right? So if budget is allotted and all that stuff, so someone need to gather. So that is where the requirements of that project being implemented, so that is the gathering phase. Okay, requirements gathering phase. And the next is data modeling. Data modeling, in most of the projects it might be there, or it might not be there, because data modeling is something if mostly involved with database thing. If the project is involving a database, or like additional or creating a new database, or modifying the existing database, or modifying the existing fields or field types, or any such thing. Yeah, so then it's gonna involve the data modeling phase, I guess. Okay, but if it's a direct files or something like that, yeah, I don't think there will be data modeling phase. Okay. So next later part is mapping phase. Mapping phase is it's pretty important because so the high level technical design is all done in project planning and design phase. Okay, so now later we need to, I mean, the developers need to code, right? Code for the yeah, basically code for the project, right? But how can a developer understand that high level technical design, which is mostly done by the designer guys, right? Because it's two different worlds. So the designer can't understand the ETL perspective. I mean, they can, but it's not like a complete understanding. Okay, so that they can start the code. Okay, and the same likewise, it's the otherwise, like basically the developer cannot understand the designer language, right? So it's two different, they have their own world, so it's different, right? So that is where this mapping phase plays an important role, because mapping phase is something like it's a bridge between the technical high level technical design document, or yeah, high level technical design document, and the development phase. So what the mapping phase involves is mapping phase, or the mapper who works on this phase designs a document which is called low level technical design document, or low level, or LDL, low level design document. So where this mapping phase basically gives a pretty clear idea to the developer how to code the stuff and what are the business rules and all that stuff. Okay, so that's a mapping phase. And then the later development phase, yeah, obviously it's our phase, so we do all the coding and all that stuff. And then the testing phase, so it's like there should be a testing phase, mostly there will be a testing phase, mostly because it's not like they're just gonna once we are done with the code, they're just gonna move our code to production or make it live, right? Because they want to test if the code the developer design is working or not, right? Because yeah, when we cook ourselves something, we just taste it, right? Because if it's, we want to know if everything is good, right? Because we are just checking ourselves if everything is good when you're doing your own cooking. And why does a project which is spending like millions of dollars or thousands of dollars need to trust the developer, a single developer, right? So yeah, that's the reason they have a testing phase where the code which is developed by developer will be tested by QA. Okay, QA or quality analysts. Okay, so yeah, basically the quality assurance and all that stuff analysis is done, and then if it's passed, then it is moved on to production. Okay, and this prod migration, it's called like, it's different, it's the terminology may be different in different scenarios. So sometimes it may be called as a technical release. So mostly what happens is in the real time they call it like different names, different terminology. When people ask like when is your technical release, it means that when is your project or when is your thing going into live. Okay, so that's the one thing, going live is it's going to production. Okay, so that's the terminology. Okay, so now that we have a brief idea about all these steps, now let's see one by one each of the steps in detail. So this first phase is obviously planning phase. Okay, so before getting into that, yeah, I tried, because it's so boring. Actually, it's not boring, but yeah, it's more of theory kind, and I don't have any jobs or anything to show. So I thought just a single presentation with all the lines or the sentences would make it boring for the viewers. So I thought I would try something innovative or a little bit funny. So I used pretty much all the cartoons related to my presentation or the flow. Okay, so yeah, I know some of them might not like it, but yeah, it's my presentation, so I thought of presenting it this way. And I'm really sorry guys if you don't like it, but yeah, I tried my best to make it little interesting, I would say. Okay, So okay, that being said, now let's move on to the planning phase. So what's happen what does exactly happen, or what does mostly happen in the planning phase is, so there is a vendor and there is a client. Okay, so vendor is someone who gives a project, or who basically who gets a project. So there is a client. Okay, so let's say A is the client and B is the vendor. Okay, so A has some a requirement. Okay, A has some project to implement, but he doesn't, or A client does not have any idea how to implement. So that's where he hires B, vendor. Okay, B is vendor. So that's where he hires vendor, and basically asks vendor to implement the project. Okay, so it's that vendor client relationship. Okay, so that's what a client and a vendor is. Okay, so this vendor might be the implementation partner, or just vendor, or sometimes partner. Yeah, there are different terminologies, but mostly I have seen people calling them vendor or implementation partner. Okay, so someone is implementing your project for the client, so basically it's an implementation partner, right? That makes sense, right? So yeah, so in the planning phase, vendor and client, or the implementation partner and the client, meets up and then discusses about the project and all that stuff. Basically they have an idea, or basically there might be a requirement. So the client basically gives a business plan. So this is how we are expecting on, this is your stuff, and this is something, this is a budget, and this is the deadline we want you to submit your project on, and all that things. And then it is passed on to the implementation partner or the vendor to implement. Okay, so yeah, basically in the planning phase, yeah, this might be the thing, like they give like the business plan, aims and benefits. If you see the cartoon here, so there is a business plan, and they give aims and benefits and cost, risk, and board agrees. So this is where the board agreement and all this stuff will happen in the client side. Okay, on the client side. So once the board agrees, then it comes on to the vendor. Okay, so once a board agrees with all that stuff, then a client representative from the company moves on to the vendor, and then discusses all this stuff to the vendor. Okay, like the project design and budgets, and like the time limit, and all those execution and needs, resources, and all that stuff. Okay, so that's the planning phase. And next, moving on to the design phase. So design is something, as I told, design sometimes sometimes planning and designing might be combined together, but this in this specific video I'm trying to explain like individual stages, because what if there are different stages? If I say like planning and designing, everything is done, and somebody asks you, okay, what happens in the design phase, or they don't usually ask those questions, but it's good to know what's happening in each phase, right? Because if the person is really working on data stage for a long time, they should know the project flow, right? Project ETL project flow, right? So it's not that the developer is just concerned about the developing stuff. He should know what's happening with the project and all that stuff too, right? That makes more sense, right? So yeah, and that's the reason I chose to split the phases into like each one part. Okay, so yeah, so the design phase is basically it's the same thing. So the designer or the application architect, or some other, I don't remember the exact designation, but yeah, people usually in the common world they call them as designers. Okay, project designers, or application architect, or just architect, or I guess. Okay, depends on project and company again. So what they do is they gather all the once they had all the planning documentation from the client, then they're gonna have the design document. They design a design document, a high level technical design document. So because what happens, this might be beneficial in some cases, because whenever the client, because designer knows what's happening, designer is on vendor side, right? The partner or the client may not know what are the scenarios, or what are the resources present on the vendor side, right? But the designer who is working on the vendor side might know what is the environment like, and what are the resources, and what's the stuff we need to have, and what's the stuff we need to acquire, and what the stuff we already have, and all that things, right? So based on his perspective about the based on his perspective of understanding the existing environment on his side, he gonna design a document, okay, that is called high level technical design document. Okay, so yeah, the project design doc will be designed. Okay, so yeah, it's just yeah, saying it in a funny way. The guy on your left side might be the vendor which is on which you are on his side, and the other guy who is on your right side is the client. So he's expecting something like Taj Mahal, and we are just trying to build him a house, right? So yeah, that's a funny way to put it, but yeah, we just want to make our clients happy, right? Because who doesn't want to make their clients happy? So yep, that's what happens in the design phase. So based on the requirements and all that stuff, a high level technical design document will be designed. Okay, and now that we have a design document, and now that we know what are the requirements, now what are the requirements we need to have, and what are the requirements we already have, and all that. So there will be a business analyst. Okay, so there will be a business analyst or BA. So BA will try, there will be a BA assigned to every project, most of the projects. So this assigned BA will try to understand the project design document or the high level technical design document. Okay, so once the BA understands the project design, then the business analyst starts gathering the requirements based on the project design document. Okay, so the requirements, you may be wondering what might be the requirements that we need, right? So as I said earlier, so it's like the hardware and software stuff, like do we need to have any hardware, any processors, or any other thing, and do we need to have do we need to build databases, and if yes, do we need to involve like what are the resources we need to pull off, like which resource we need to assign to database building, and how long does it take, and basically it's like entire requirements will be gathered. Okay, so it's like the scattered, everyone is doing their own things, right? So what does business analyst does is he or she brings everyone onto the same platform, which is called a project. Okay, so on different backgrounds, or different what do I say, different things, different environments, they bring on to one platform, which is to make this project work. Okay, so basically that's the thing. And yeah, and once they have this requirements gathering, they're going to design a business requirements document. So BRD, which is usually called BRD. Okay, business requirements doc. Okay, so once they have a business requirements doc, then they're gonna pass it on. They have a business requirement doc on the gather about all the stuff we need and all that, right? So then they're gonna discuss with the project manager and business. Business is client. Okay, in real time we normally don't say client. We usually term as business. Okay, so business is someone who gave us the project to implement. Okay, so yeah, so after the BRD is designed, then the business analyst discusses with the project manager, PM, or and businesses, and sometimes depending on the requirement and the stuff, ETL manager or lead or a designer, and if their database modeling is involved, a data modeler and DBA, they all might be involved, and they're gonna discuss something. Okay, and see if everything gonna work out. Okay, and then later on, all with those changes made as necessary, they're gonna come up with the like the final business required document. Okay, final BRD. So that final BRD need to be approved by the client, okay, or the business. Okay, because there should be a sign off from the business before we move on to the next stage, because we just want to make sure that our client or our business is happy, and this is what we need to understand their expectations from us, right? Because if they give us something, and if we implement something, that's pretty mess, right? So just want to make sure that what we are trying to implement the same thing as they are trying, as they are thinking. So that's the reason we just want to have a sign of approval. Okay, so whenever in the planning phase, what happens in the planning phase is the client or the business allots a specific people, or two or three people or a group of people to the client, to the vendor, so that if anything is happening, or any changes or any other requirements come up in the middle or something like that, we need to get a sign off from the business, because that's official, to make it official. Okay, so once it is official from the business, then it's moved on to the next phase. Okay, uh, one other thing I want to say here is, once a final BRD is required, is done. So before the sign off of the business, they're gonna check something like estimated deliverables and delivery date, estimated budget, requirements, and all that stuff, just to make sure that both vendor and the client, or the business and the implementation partner, are on the same page. Okay, so if they are on the same page, then they're gonna just give a sign off. If they are not, then they're gonna ask the vendor to try again, or change the requirement, change the BRD document as necessary, and then get again their approval sign off. Okay, till they're happy, they'll not give a sign off. Okay, so yeah, that's one thing. And the next is modeling phase. Modeling phase, as I said in the introduction, it is probably involved if a database build is involved. Okay, it is probably this modeling phase exists only when mostly when database build is involved, or even if a database is not involved, new database build is not involved, it might be like just a change of the existing field name, or existing field type length, or something like that, existing field type, or the length of the field type, and all that. Yeah, the modeling phase should be involved. Okay, so in the modeling phase, who works as modeler works, data modeler, with their tools like the Irwin tool, or some other tools. Yeah, they usually do all the data modeling stuff. Okay, like the Snowflake and Star Schema, they do all this stuff in the modeling phase. Okay, so let's say if you have let's say this project has a new database, or at least the field of something is changed or something. Okay, let's say for now a new database is built. Okay, so in this example, let's say time, product, and sales are already existing, and now they added a new table called store. Okay, so they built a new table called store. So it's not that the store gonna be isolated table. It should be linked to some other fact table, right? Because it's something dimensions. Okay, so yeah, if it's a dimension, if it's some dimension like the star flake or snowflake or something schema, so then it should be linked to something, right? Some fact table, right? So yeah, so who links how do we know that this table is linked to this table? And how do we know that? We know that from the modeler. Okay, data model, and that data model will be done by data modeler in the modeling phase. Okay, so before doing that, they're gonna before doing all the data modeler and stuff, the data modeler, as soon as they have a business requirement doc, or the project design doc, they're gonna interact. If there is a database development, they're gonna involve DBAs, database administrators, or sometimes ETL architect may be also involved, and then discuss and come up with an idea how to model the stuff. Okay, so that's when they have this data model given out. Okay, so that's a modeling phase. And next is a mapping phase. Mapping phase is so now, as I said earlier in the introduction part, this is like a bridge that conveys the information between the project planning or the design phase and the code development. Okay, so what happens in mapping phase is, based on the business requirement doc designed by the business analyst, and based on the data model from the modeler, so mapper or the mapping analyst designs a mapping doc or low level design document. Okay, so it's basically mapping doc, it's mostly called mapping doc. Okay, and this mapping doc is it's like Bible for the code developer. Okay, that it's like Bible for the developer. because whatever developer codes, it must be based on the mapping doc unless some new change or something happens. Okay. So yeah, the other thing which I want to say is this low level document via the high level document, this might be different terminologies in some other projects too, but this is most common. Okay. So that being said, and next yeah, so what happens in mapping phase is, so the mapping analyst studies all the data model stuff, BRD, and the design document and all that stuff, and then the mapper designs something like this. So the mapping indicator, probably it's mapping okay, so before getting into that, the mapping document will have like different formats. Okay, there is no standard format to follow. It depends on the project, it depends on the budget, it depends on the mapping analyst who is designing, and it depends on the organization requirements and all that things. Okay, so there is no standard format to follow. However, there will be it will be pretty much same. The naming convention and the field names and all those might be different, but overall it's gonna convey the same message to the developer. Okay. Okay. So what happens in the mapping doc is mapping indicator. Mapping indicator, I'm not sure what is mapping indicator because I didn't have anything else, I didn't have anything till now like something called mapping indicator. But if I need to guess, it will be something like A means probably adding, I guess, and C means changing. LO means changing, I guess. So if something is we need to add something, so it's going to be A, and if we need to change something, change the existing one, then it's going to be C, I guess. But yeah, it doesn't matter. This is not a big deal. Okay. So the key indicator and the description and yeah, so this is a change, so business rule change. Okay, so that's the thing. And key indicator, if it's a key field or primary key or unique key or foreign key of some table and all that stuff. Okay, and the source table and file name. So source table name is needed because we want to know from where we wanna so let's say the requirement is okay, something like, okay, so we need to know from where we are pulling the field name employee first name, right? So if they're just gonna give EMP first name, we are not sure from which table or which file we want to pull the EMP first name, right? That's the reason they give us the employee info too. And sometimes if there are like big tables and lot schemas with this pretty much same things, so they're gonna give this is the schema and this is the table name and this is the database. Okay, so they're gonna mention that too. So they're gonna give entire information from where you need to pull the fields. Okay, and they will give you the source field length and the data type, what is it, and what are you converting, because if there is some conversion from the field length to data type, you want to know what are the source data types, right? So that's the reason they're going to mention these two. And sometimes, yeah, they give this source field description, like what exactly there will be sometimes there will be like weird names for the field names, so we will sometimes there will be like a 1 2 3 4 or something, like it doesn't make sense or doesn't make doesn't make sense if you just see the field name. So you want to understand what that field represent, right? So that's the reason they might have this for source field description. And then obviously business rule, this is a critical part. Okay, business rule, because everything you design or whatever the transformation rules or whatever the rules you are applying on your data stage code, that will be based on this business rule thing. Okay, so if it says direct mapping, yeah, you should directly map. And if it says append e before the number, yeah, so use append or something like which appends the field. Okay, and if it's this thing, then if it's going to be if then else statement and all that stuff. And if it's if it says concatenation and something, yeah, you're going to concatenate. So everything you design is depends on the business rule field. Okay, and then obviously they're going to be target table and field name, because we have source everything about the source, right? So now we need to know where this source is going to, right? If there is no target table name or field name or anything, how do we know which field is being mapped to, or which field is going on to the target table, right? Or field, right? Or a file, right? So that's the reason they're going to give target like all the details about the target same as a source thing, like. target table name, schema, field name, and data type, and length type, and all, length, field length, and all those things. Okay. So basically, consolidating all the together, mapping analyst basically designs a mapping document so that it conveys what are the sources, field types, lengths, and what's a business rule you need to apply for your code, and where it should be loaded, or what table or to what field it should be loaded, and what can be changed. Okay, so that's pretty much is happening in the mapping phase. So now that we have a mapping document, then it's moved to the development phase. Okay, I'm sorry. So every phase, like all these phases, should have, once it's moved on to once before it's moving to the next stage, they will get a sign off from each department head. Okay. So if it's a modeling phase, if it's done and it's ready to move on to mapping phase, then they're gonna ask the data modeler or the head of the data modelers to gonna give a sign off from the modeling phase. Then same with the mapping phase. Okay, and same with the every phase will have the sign off. Okay, so just to make sure that okay, it's everything is done on our end, and now they need to move. They can move back to the next phase. Okay. Okay, so next is the development phase. In the development phase, so first thing is we have a mapping document on our hand, right? So the developer understands or reads or understands the mapping document. Okay, and then they're gonna gather info about all the like the source based on the mapping document. We will know what are the information we need to gather, right? So they're gonna gather information like okay, so this is a source and this is the target, but what is the record layout, and what is the table information, or what is the file path where the files are landing, and what is the volume info, how many records will be pulling each day, and what's if the data is good, and how is the data, if is there any like the good data or the dirty data, or like something like okay, what's wrong, if there is any stupid data, something like that. Okay, and also make sure that the mapper or the mapping analyst has mentioned sensible mapping rules, business rules, because if something is in a way that ETL cannot do that, it need to be changed so that ETL code can do that, right? So yeah, gather information. Developer, once he studies or she studies about the mapping doc, the developer gathers all the information about the stuff, and then if something is wrong, then he or she will go to the mapping analyst and discusses, and then will make sure the developer should not start the code until and unless everything is clear with everything is clear between mapping analyst and developer. Okay, because once you start coding, it might get difficult. So before starting coding, try to understand the design document, try to understand the mapping document in detail, and try working out if something if you feel it's not making sense, or if something is wrong, or if you don't understand something, then try to work out with the mapping analyst. Yeah, just figure it out. Okay, so once the information is gathered, then they're gonna be they're gonna be coding, right? So that the code needs to be developed, so there's gonna be lots and lots of coffee. Okay, just kidding. Okay, so once the code is developed, then there should be some unit testing, right? So if the code is developed, you just can't say okay, the code is developed, because you need to test it for yourself, right? So there are going to be two testing phases. One is unit testing, and the other is QA testing. Unit testing is something you're gonna do it for yourself. Okay, the developer does it for himself or herself, so as to make sure that the code the developer designed is perfectly good. Okay, so yeah, so the unit testing will be something like okay, so is the job running without warnings in the job logs, and is something like if okay, so before a unit, what happens in the while you develop or run the sample data is you just run with a few data. Even there are millions and millions of records, you don't run everything with millions of records. You just choose a sample of data and do all your testing with that sample of data. Okay, So okay, so when you're running with the sample data, make sure that the job log or the job log is not with error, is without errors and warnings, and see if expected result matches actual output generated from DS job, because mapping document says okay, this should go to this is the business rule, so this should, the source field should happen to this, right? So now once your code is run, just make sure that the output is same as the expectation from the mapping document. Okay, and check if the source and target record count is matching. Like if 100 records are loaded, and if you are not collecting any reject records, just make sure that the records are not being dropped, or for some reason they are not being loaded, or some reason they are just rejecting. Okay, so basically make sure the source and the target and all other output links gonna match the source record count. Okay, and if you haven't handled the rejected or dropped records, yeah, try to handle the null handling stuff and the rejected record stuff, and do all that things, and make sure the count is same based on the transformation rules, of course. And then also check the naming standards, okay, because every project has its own naming standards, so just follow and make sure that you have the correct naming standards. And once again, verify all business rules if they are right as per the mapping document. And then if it's all done, then prepare a unit test doc. Unit test doc is something where you say, this is the sample data I have checked with, and these are the scenarios which I checked, like this, okay, this code is matching to this, the source record count is matching to target record count, and this rule is matching to this rule, so expected same output and all that stuff. So basically you put everything onto the unit test document. And then like job name, okay, so unit test document will be handed over to QA. Okay, so before that, before handing it over to QA, you prepare the unit test document. Okay, so that unit test document will be given to peer review. Peer review is something like, again, this step may not be involved in every project, but yeah, it's ideal to follow this step, because the code which looks good to your eye may not seem to be good enough to the other eye, because some might say, okay, so you have, let's say you have a transformation rule. Okay, so you have thought about like 10 different scenarios, what happens if, what if null is happening, what if empty, if it's empty, and what if all that stuff. Okay, so you have checked all that stuff and you feel that the code is good, but when you discuss, or when you give the code to your senior developer or the lead ETL lead, so they might have a different perspective, right? So before moving on to the next phase, you might want to have a different perspective from from your co-developers or senior developers or lead or manager, and so that they can have a peer review section and see if everything is good or not. Okay, so that if peer review section is passed through, then the unit test document or the unit test plan document is passed on to the QA phase. So what's happening from the unit test document is, officially you're giving sign off as a developer, you're giving sign off that the code is good and it's done with the peer review and all that stuff, and then you're handing it over to QA for the huge data testing. Okay, so if you check with like 50 or 100 records, they're going to test with some huge amount of data. Okay, they're not going to test with the same sample data. Okay, so that's where the development phase is done. So next is QA testing phase. So QA testing phase, obviously, as I said, they're going to check the quality and all that stuff. So first thing they're going to do is they're going to review the UT doc from the developer. They obtain from the developer unit test document. So they're going to understand the unit test document and figure out the job names, location, and number of records loaded, and the data types, and everything. So okay, and they will test the data that the developer loaded in QA with their data. Okay, so they create their own data as per their standards. Okay, and that data will be checked against the developer loaded data, and if it's if their data matches the same data loaded by the developer, then it's all good. If not, if something is missing, then the QA raises a defect. Okay, so the QA, the analyst or the tester, it's in the regular world they are called testers. Okay, ETL testers. So the ETL tester raises a defect. So there is a there will be a defect tracking tool. So it will be assigned to respective people, developer and all that stuff. Okay, so as soon as if something is wrong, as soon as the ETL tester finds out that something is wrong with the code, then he or she will identify the defect and raise a defect and assign the defect to the person concerned, like the developer. Okay, so and then developer works out with the QA and sees what's a defect and why is it coming, and then he gonna reanalyze his or her code and then fixes the defect. Okay, if the defect makes sense, then yeah, fixes the defect. If the defect is not making sense and the QA is missing something, yeah, then the developer will work out something with tester and see how is why it's happening and all that. Okay, so once the developer fixes the defect, then tester again retests the defect, like that specific problem, and if it's success, yeah, then they're gonna give official sign off from the QA. Okay, so yeah, that's how if the test is passed, then we'll give a sign off document. Okay, that's all. That's pretty much in the QA testing phase. Okay, so next is the prod migration phase. Prod migration phase is something your project manager handles. Sometimes what happens in some projects is some of the projects will not have any developer or any other people going near production, because they all have their own separate production team. So once the QA sign off is done, the production team gonna handle that. So okay, so some of the companies might have that, and the other companies, they're gonna have they're gonna have the same people involved, like all throughout the people from the initial, they're gonna involve in the prod migration phase until it's done. Okay, so that's how it's gonna happen. Again, it's not a hard and fast rule that they should follow the same thing, but yeah, just saying. So once everything is sign off and everything from each department is done, so the project manager or the technical release manager, who is called TRM, they're gonna create a production migration doc. Okay, prod migration document. So this prod migration document includes like all the job names and scripts, Unix script names, and all the things, etc. So all these things that want to be migrated from UAT to production. Okay, so the developer develops a code in development environment, and the QA tests the code in test environment. And once everything is good, that the code should be moved from test to production, right? So just to move from test to production, there will be prod migration document. So whatever is in test environment related to this project, everything like scripts and everything like scheduling tool and all that stuff, they're gonna put it on the production migration document, and then they're gonna have this and then they're gonna have this thing. Okay, and let's say if the admin team, if there are ETL jobs, the admin team gonna migrate. Okay, so the respective admin teams migrates the script, like the Unix admins migrates the Unix scripts, and the data stage admins migrate the data stage jobs, and the scheduling tools migrate the scheduling, all those things. Okay, respective departments admins, they have privileged rights to migrate from test to production environment. Okay, so after production document and everything is migrated by admin, the developer needs to check the developer or the concerned person needs to check if the job migrated successfully and is in runnable state. So what's happening is, basically, when let's say you have a job in test, okay, and the developer and the admin said, okay, so the job is now moved from test to production. So when that confirmation is given from admin, you might want to check the developer should check if the job is really moved or something is wrong, or it's already it's in a runnable state, because if it's not compiled, we can't compile. There will be no write access in production, right? So you can't compile it yourself. So is it in a runnable state, or it's already compiled, and all that stuff. Just make sure that it's all good. Okay, same with the Unix scripts, like if it has write permissions to run and all that stuff. Okay, so just to make sure that it's all good in the initial phase only. Okay, so yeah, that's thing. And the other thing is for the first run. So for the first run, okay, so now it's everything is good, so everything is migrated and everything is in a runnable state and good. Okay, so as per the scheduled time, they're gonna have a run. Okay, right? So let's say if it's scheduled evening sometime at 7 p.m. so on Saturday or something. Okay, so weekends, I mean production releases will usually be on weekends, because it's like pretty much not to interrupt any clients or any users basically. Okay, so once the first time for the first time when the job is run, the developer needs to retest the code. I mean, not the code, basically retest the data. What they all have done with the unit test document, like checking the source and record target count, volume load, and file info, and the record layout, and all that stuff. Yeah, they're gonna do it here again, because it's a good idea to check at the initial run, right? Because if something is wrong in the initial run, we just can't move forward with the next run, right? So just make sure that there are no errors, like there are no errors and there is no junk data, and there is enough space on the target table if you are loading like millions of records or something. So all that stuff. Okay, so if something so basically if something is okay, let's say you have checked you have checked those things, and let's say you have found some error. Okay, let's say while you're loading to a table, you have found that there is some junk data is coming from the source file or the source database, or there is not enough space on the target table. Okay, or sometimes there might be warnings in the job log, because the environment is different. The same job which did not throw any warnings in the test environment might throw warnings in the production environment. So you just want to make sure that there are no warnings. Okay, so what happens if there are warnings, or what happens if something happens which is not usual? Okay, or which you didn't expect to happen. Okay, so that's when what developer needs to do is, because they don't have write access or you don't have anything to do with the production thing, they want to consult the production support, or at least the it depends again on company, if they have production support team or it's just admin team or something like that. Okay, so just want to consult with the production support team and make necessary changes, or like to halt or to abort the job, or something like. Okay, so if let's say if there is junk data, so you might want to abort the job and then analyze the data coming from the source. And if there is not enough space on the target table, then you might want to talk to DBS. If you might want to ask the production team to stop the job and talk to DBS about the space issues, then they're going to increase the table space for that specific table, and then you're going to start it again. Okay, so that's what, like, basically you need to figure out why it's happening and what should be done. It's basically error handling. Okay, so you need to perform all the error handling based on the SOPs. SOP is standard operating procedure. Every company have their own standard operating procedures. What happens if some job fails in the production, and what happens with all that stuff. Okay, so based on that SOP, they're gonna have their error handling. And basically, okay, let's say if there is no SOP, so what happens is the developer or the concerned person should create an SOP for themselves and get it approval from the manager, so that they're gonna follow for the production handling. Okay, error handling stuff. Okay, so after this is all done, and now code is run for the second time or multiple times. Okay, second time. Okay, so for the multiple times, like based on the schedule, the developer, it's always a good idea for the developer to monitor the job which are like moved recently, for at least like 2 to 3 runs, or at least like 3 runs max, 3 runs max. Okay, so just to make sure that everything is good, because it's like a newborn baby, right? And it's a different environment, so you just want to make sure that okay, the job is running good, it's getting new data, and there is enough space, and there is no warnings in the job log and all that stuff, right? So you might want to monitor for at least a few runs, okay, based on the schedule. If it's like okay, you need not do anything, just try to monitor the job log, and try to match the source and target record. Basically do all the unit testing stuff you have done here for the monitor jobs. Okay, and yeah, if it's all good, yeah, then it's all good. So the production, it keeps running itself. Okay, so yep, so it's a lot of teamwork and brainstorming. So yeah, that's once done, then we'll give it to, okay, so we'll say to the client that okay, so this is done and it's all in production, and so you can just run your data and see if everything is good, or we might want to change anything or something like that. Okay, so yep, so this is a funny cartoon. Yeah, well, I have finished the project on time and budget. So the client says that means I have given you too much time and too much money. That's funny. Yeah, so that's pretty much about the project flow, ETL project flow. So I just want to make this video because it makes more sense when you have a real time idea how your project flows, right? Like what's the flow of your project in the real time, because what happens like after this what happens, so how is your code migrated to production? So that might be the question. And so if you don't know what's a cycle, what's a project life cycle, so then it might be a problem. So that is the main reason I thought to make a video on this stuff. Okay, and yeah, thank you so much guys, thank you so much for watching. And so probably in my next video I'll try to make videos on whatever the left stages are in the processing category, so that we'll be getting close to finishing the processing category palette. Okay, alright guys, thank you so much for watching, and a very 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 happy new year.